Thanks, Greg, and good morning, all. I'm still a bit hoarse after shouting for England last night, but it wouldn't be England if we weren't still able to say, I still believe. One day football will be coming home, but let's keep going. Well, colleagues, good to see you all again. It is a year ago since we came together, and I reflected in my remarks at that point about the ever-changing and evolving story of air power, and importantly, the challenges ahead. Now, you know, this is a story of constant imagination, invention and adaptation in which we've had to evolve time and time again to stay ahead of those who threaten our security. And 3 weeks ago, in large part to the wonderful work that Harv and his team did, we managed to publish the Defence Investment Plan. That's a £298 billion down payment over the next 4 years to deliver our strategic defence review. It has £31 billion earmarked for air and space. It is one era-defining blueprint for a hybrid, digitally integrated and AI-enabled Air Force. A blueprint that protects the homeland by bringing together two commands with our new Integrated Air, Space and Missile Defence Operations Centre. A blueprint that delivers 3 gold standard combat air platforms in F-35, Typhoon and Tempest, and that creates high-value jobs across all 4 of our home nations. Now, it also injects £5 billion into UK drone innovation and capabilities. Now, that's up from £4 billion that we previously announced. It includes autonomous fighter jets, networked with our crewed platforms to improve their effectiveness and survivability. That will make the Royal Air Force Europe's first 6th-generation Air Force. 6 steps that secure a brighter future for our Royal Air Force and soon to be renamed Air and Space Command, as well as a more secure future for the UK, our allies and our partners. And on a more personal note, for those that have seen me do media interviews on the Defence Investment Plan for the last year, it means I never have to say we're working flat out to deliver it ever again, which will be a joy for everyone that has to listen to me and me for having to say it. But look, when I spoke to you a year ago, I said that realising the benefits of more mass, more lethality in the air was a team sport, and it certainly is today. And it continues to be that shared endeavour. In cockpits and hangars, on drawing boards and production lines, from RAF bases to Ramstein and beyond. And over the last 12 months, thanks to allies, partners and partners in industry, those teams have stepped up and delivered time and time again, strengthening defence, saving lives and reimagining what is possible. And we've seen that teamwork in the North Atlantic, where our P8s have increasingly worked more closely with our Norwegian, US, Canadian and German counterparts to counter the Russian threats. On NATO's eastern flank, our Typhoons are flying over Romania and have flown the RAF's first ever air defence sorties over Poland, defending against Russian incursions alongside our allies. And over the last 12 months, the RAF has done much to strengthen the NATO alliance and increase European deterrence. Now, with HMS Prince of Wales becoming the most advanced 5th-generation carrier strike capability, the Alliance has never had something like that under its flag before. That's something that the UK is very proud of. And earlier this month, its F-35s achieved a NATO first, conducting the Alliance's first ever air policing operations launched from a European carrier. And as you may have seen, they've had to deal with some rather angry Russian bears during that period as well. Now, I make light of it here because among friends and in this sector, we all know the dangers that we are facing and increasingly risky and dangerous times that we all live in. We all understand what's at stake and the skills and bravery that is required to meet that moment. And as a minister, especially one 3 years in, with a reshuffle only a couple of days away, it allows me to say thank you to all those who have served, both in the RAF and in our friendly forces alongside us, for their professionalism and their hard work. And importantly, it's not just those in the air that matter, it's all those on the ground that make the operations in the air possible. Now, moving beyond NATO, because the UK remains NATO first, but not NATO only, our RAF F-35s conducted over 1,000 joint air exercise sorties as part of our 2025 Carrier Strike Group deployment to the Indo-Pacific. And I thank all of our allies, especially those that are here today, for their assistance and those that hosted us. Now, that was a team that stretched from Portugal to Australia via Qatar, Oman, and then the UAE, across India, Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines to Korea and Japan, with support along the way from Canada, our friends in the US, and various additional European allies as well. It was international by design, and it was internationally delivered. Thank you. Some of those teams were reunited earlier this year in the Middle East as Iran targeted its neighbours in response to the US and Israeli attacks. The RAF flew over 3,000 hours of defensive missions, intercepting over 100 drones and missiles. And again, we thank them, the air crews and the ground crews that supported them, for the skills shown and the lives that were saved. I think I want to give a special mention, which is hard to do in the media on our interviews, but for a crowd like this, you'll appreciate it, to our Rivet Joint Intelligence Gathering teams, particularly those who faced down Russian fire over the Black Sea last September. And in total, across the last 12 months, the RAF has teamed up with 45 other nations for exercises and operations. That's a truly formidable team, and goes to reinforce that the Royal Air Force that we are building and growing is international by design with strong partnerships, and that will continue. But as Greg mentioned in the introduction, it's also about how we build our industrial alliances to make them stronger, because there's another team of partners that are vital in there. That's our partners in industry. Now, it's both a cliche and a truism to say that our armed forces are only as strong as the industry that stands behind them. We see that in Ukraine. We know that to be true. But it is also something that many nations are playing catch up on too late, realizing that we have to have a closer bond with our industrial friends, both large and small, to deliver the increased capabilities and the innovation that we need. And both domestically and internationally, our industrial cooperation has been making us significantly stronger over the past year. So thank you to the team at CGI and many of the supporting SMEs behind our Borealis space awareness system that went operational this year, 6 months ahead of schedule. I wish, as a minister, I could say that more frequently, but it was very good that we did there, including our team at Spaceflux, who have given us our first images from Noctis 1, the UK's new military space telescope. Together, they've given the UK the sovereign eyes we need to monitor, protect, and defend our critical space infrastructure. And we will all see how space has become a domain of growing competition that is central to warfighting, and it is essential that we have sovereign capabilities. For those that heard my speech a few times ago, I spoke about the importance of all-domain warfare. And at the time, that was a phrase that the UK didn't use that much. It is now embedded into each one of our services, each one of our strategies, that we can't do any operation in any domain without the support of all domains. Now, that is also a truism. But if we are to take that at its heart, that means we need a different approach to how we deliver, deploy, and interconnect those services as well. Well, that's why we've established a new space systems group under the National Armaments Director to deliver additional capabilities in the space domain that helps enable activities across all domains, including in a UK-first offensive space capabilities that will be operated by 6 new specialist space squadrons trained at the Defence Space Academy alongside allies and international partners. Sovereign capability was also the starting point for Tempest, our 6th generation stealth combat jet that we are developing alongside our Italian and Japanese partners, as well as the Global Combat Air Programme that is gaining attention further afield. Earlier this month, we were delighted to press go on the design and test phase with a £4.6 billion contract awarded to Reading-based Edgewing Consortium that lead this work. That's made up of BAE Systems, Leonardo, and the various partners involved in the Japan Aircraft Industrial Enhancement Company. BAE and their vast ecosystem of British suppliers have also benefited greatly this year from the legacy capability partnerships with Turkey Typhoon deal and the Ukraine Gripen deal and various F-35 deals set to benefit thousands of UK workers who manufacture between 15% and 37% of those platforms by value. As export campaigns, the UK is also pivoting from campaigning not just on platforms, but on components and services, able to reach more markets, support more allies in their work, and grow our economy and theirs at the same time. Now, deals and investment that will also galvanise our defence and aerospace industrial base are key to delivering economic growth here. Supported by our new defence export strategy that will come later this year, that will focus on the whole range of options that British industry are good at, that your air forces also benefit from as well, demonstrating how collaborative air power spreads capabilities among allies and fuels economic growth in all our communities. Now, if you haven't read the Defence Investment Plan, it's worth having a read. I kind of made a pitch for people having a read of the Strategic Defence Review before. I'm sure quite a lot of you have. But the DIP sets out a bigger, bolder vision and a transformation that we haven't seen in peacetime in the UK for a very, very long time. Space and aerospace industries received a huge boost from our Defence Investment Plan, and that will fuel those sectors over the coming decades. So over the next 4 years alone, 8.6 billion has been allocated to fund the design and testing phase of GCAP, a further 1.1 billion to upgrade and sustain our Typhoon combat force well into the 2040s, and more than 4.5 billion invested in our transporter fleet of A400M Voyager and C-17s. More than 2 billion to lay the ground for our first F-35As that will enable the RAF to join NATO's tactical nuclear mission, providing a long overdue additional rung on our escalation ladder. The DIP also included 360 million for the full recapitalisation of the jet training system that will ultimately deliver new jets for our Red Arrows. And most eye-catching of all, building on Storm Shroud system that I spoke about last year, we also press go on our next phase of autonomous combat air power with our collaborative combat aircraft programme. Now, that will develop autonomous jets here in the UK, providing new levels of lethality and survivability for our crewed jets, acting as both guardian angel and an attack dog for our Typhoons, F-35 and future Tempest jets. Now, maximising our air power in the eye of the storm of future combat, that will be swarming with drones, 6th generation fighter jets and ever-evolving EW capabilities. And today, I'm delighted to unveil that our new autonomous CCA programme will be named Stormfighter. Stormfighter will make the RAF's Europe's first 6th generation air force. It is an investment alongside the 5 billion which we're investing in drones and other advanced uncrewed systems that will nourish our defence innovation ecosystem, meaning more programmes like Project Vanquish, which is a trialling jet-powered drones to serve alongside our F-35Bs currently, putting our partner companies at the leading edge of autonomous combat air power and laying the ground for exports, growth, partnership with friendly nations, more defence jobs and a more resilient defence industrial base. And I think to do that, we also need to learn the right lessons from Ukraine. Now, there are those that said we should have gone even further on drones, or even all in replacing crewed aircraft completely. I don't believe that's the right lesson that we should take from Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, because evidently the UK is not Ukraine. We do not share a land border with Russia. We are a member of NATO, and we have security and global interests and responsibilities that require the type of air power that only combat jets and deep strike can deliver, which is why we've been investing in deep strike innovation alongside NATO allies and steadily building the foundations for the growth we want to see in our aerospace sector, including with our £182 million skills package. That includes 5 new Defence Technical Excellence colleges, with 2 located in the heartlands of our aerospace sector in Yeovil and Blackpool, providing the foundations to deliver on our mission to make the UK the best place in the world to grow a defence business. Now, Defence hasn't invested in skills in the way that it has needed to, but we need to now, because with more of a rising defence budget being spent with companies based in Britain, we need to supply more people into that roles. More young people finding their first career, more graduates, and more mid-career reskilling. So to riff off an old marketing slogan, the future's bright, the future's Air Force Blue, because last year I challenged us all to evolve again, to stay ahead of those who threaten our security. And this year we've delivered the blueprint and investment to accelerate that transformation here in the UK. The RAF was a big winner from the Defence Investment Plan, strengthened by our £27.8 billion investment over the next 4 years to build Europe's first 6th-generation Air Force, built around 6th-generation sovereign Tempest jets, flying alongside autonomous Stormfighter combat aircraft and frontier drone technologies developed with allies made in the UK, fueling growth in our defence and aerospace sectors and galvanising deterrence, alongside our upgraded Typhoon and expanded F-35 fleets, showing the continued importance of air power to deter and defeat, as we boost security for the UK, for Europe and our partners around the globe. So whether you're an ally, a partner in industry, we stand ready to continue to work with you as a team, and I'd welcome your difficult questions now. Thanks very much.
Would you like to take a seat, Minister? I will
Thank you.
just retrieve the iPad. Thank you very much for that speech. I just wanted to light on the Defence Investment Plan to start off with. Obviously, as you say, in the Strategic Defence Review, there has been widely praised, but the DIP has come under quite a lot of scrutiny. It's prompted resignations. This has been a tough time. And it could affect morale, not just within the forces, but also among our partners as well. How would you respond to that?
So it will be churlish of me to say it has not been an eventful time in publishing the Defence Investment Plan, shall I say. I was very sad to see both John Healey, who I think is a materially important Defence Secretary, resign from his post. We need more money for defence. That has been clear. We secured more money for defence with the Defence Investment Plan, an uplift of 15 billion over our spending review settlement. And perhaps the most important line, which I think few focus on, is the commitment in the Defence Investment Plan to review defence spending in the spending review in 2027, so next year, setting out the growth to 3% of GDP on defence, then on to 3.5% of GDP by 2035, which means a decade ahead of rising defence spending. Now, much of the debate, I think, over the last 6 months has frustratingly sometimes just been on what day are you publishing it, rather than what's in it. And I entirely get that. I want to see it published as well, and I want to debate. But now we have a Defence Investment Plan that's deliberately scalable. So if we get more money, as we will next year, and then the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, until 2035, I want the clarity on what we are spending that money on. So I know when we get more money next year, we have the ability to scale more low-cost effectors, as well as filling our Gucci end of our stockpiles, more autonomy in drones, faster workforce recovery, more investment in defence housing. And I think when it looks at morale, for me, morale is the benchmark that any government should assess their success by for our people. And over the last decade, in every service, including the RAF, morale was falling. Not just headline figures on morale, but also satisfaction with housing. And last year, for the first time in a very long time, morale went up and satisfaction with defence housing went up. Now, that is important, but I'm not going to be crowing about it until that is a trend that can properly show that our people are more valued, are more respected, and that means, I think, government and the whole system making a stronger case for defence in the public eyes, because so much of the morale and how our people feel about their work is influenced by how the wider society feels about their work. And where we have rubbish housing and our homes that we ask too many of our people live in is frankly not good enough, and that's why we're knocking down 9 in 10 of them in the next decade, investing £9 billion in housing renewal. It's not just the kind of like the brand new piece of technology, it's how we look after our people, and that for me is the really important part. So morale is going up. I want to see it continue to go up, just as I want to see defence spending to continue to rise.
Okay, thank you. We've got questions popping through on the screen. I note in your speech you talked about the £4.5 billion to support the transport fleet, Voyager and C-17. But the question here is, given the increased demand for boom air refuelling within the F-35A fleet expansion, will the UK be investing in its air tanker fleet to provide that capability?
Yeah, so the air tanker arrangement was a kind of private sector partnership that was formed quite some time ago. That is coming up to the point where we could look at revisiting elements of that. And there's certainly parts of that I think are worth us having a look at again. The mix of the two different refueling types for air-to-air refueling is one that we will need to have a greater clarity on in the future. I think for the moment, if we're looking at where the F-35As will be operating and the type of mission that we will be using them for in due course, the ability for them to refuel alongside our NATO partners will be a key part of that sustainment in the air operations as they push forwards. But ultimately, I want us to be having a forward-facing approach to this, and that is also looking at what is the refueling types that we'll be using for GCAP, and how do we effectively transition. And like most things across our armed forces, the challenge is not finding the end state solution. The challenge is managing between a mixed fleet in the meantime, a mixed fleet of frigates, a mixed fleet of crewed and autonomous platforms, a mixed fleet of potentially refueling options. So that is something that we are aware of, and it will form part of our thinking in the years ahead, especially when the F-35s start coming online in the early 2030s.
Thank you. So we have another question. The vision is clear and ambitious, but can you comment on how long you anticipate it taking to change the culture in the NAD, which underpins, it's just popped away now, which underpins the MOD's ability to deliver on this vision? There's real talk about a need to change culture. You talk about readiness, you're the Minister for Readiness, but actually just how ready is the whole ecosystem to deliver these changes? So
I get asked this quite a lot, especially in TV interviews, where journalists will say, but we're not ready to fight a war, are we? Which is a good provocative question. And I say, yes, we are. We could fight tonight, but tomorrow we'll fight stronger than we can today. And the day after that, we'll fight stronger than we can today. And that is about the increasing in readiness that we are building across the Defence Investment Plan. So we do need to continue making the case for the professionalism, for the strength of our armed forces, because there is a school of thought within society and within all our nations that enjoys talking down progress, that enjoys sidelining the innovations. So we need to make the case for that. But I think the question is spot on. I want to see culture change. And in my mind, culture change is not just getting folks like Harv to agree that things need to change. Because I see within the RAF, and in fact within all our chiefs, incredible determination to change, to pivot to new technologies, to look after our people. I want to see people who are earning 30 to 40,000 feeling that they've got the ability and the agency to take the steps necessary to improve things. And I must have a word with my speechwriter, because this is the first speech I've made in quite some time where I haven't talked about stupid rules. Now, some of you may have followed me talking about this before. It's one of my real things about culture that gets my goat. Stupid rules. In any of your organisations, there are rules not introduced by legislation, but have been kind of accreted over time. Risk aversion, like really stupid things that just get in the way. And in my mind, we now have a single mission in defence, which we did not have two and a bit years ago when this government came to office. Their single mission is to get ready for warfighting against a peer adversary. Every part of defence, that is our mission. Now, if that is to be delivered, I not only need new technologies, refill my stockpiles, I need people to feel more empowered at work. Now, that means getting rid of stupid rules that slow things down. Because if I'm going to change the procurement process that says a large procurement currently takes 6 years worth of contracting and get that to 2 years, well, I'm not going to be able to do that without a culture change. That's a culture change on risk, that's a culture change on process, but it's also one that gets rid of stupid rules to increase productivity. And I would say my favourite stupid rule that we've managed to get rid of in the last few months, which may or may not relate to your question here, so forgive me, is anyone who's lived in military accommodation in Britain knows that we are allowed 2 types of paint. Your house has to be white or magnolia. Normally magnolia. It's awful. And so one of the suggestions that came from our people via the get rid of stupid rules consultation that we've been running internally in the MOD is to say, let's get rid of that stupid rule. Because when you move into your service family accommodation, you paint your house because magnolia is awful. And then when you leave, you paint it magnolia again. So the next person that comes in a week later can repaint it a proper colour that's not magnolia. It's one of those soul-sapping type things for people that have served. And so now we have 12 paint palettes within the MOD. So you can choose. And I use that as an example of like, the culture change we need is not just how we get rid of those behaviours within our services that are unacceptable, that we all know are unacceptable. It is about how we empower our people to stay longer, to feel more empowered, to feel more committed and engaged. And that is about process reduction. It is about empowerment. It is about a culture where people are happier turning up to work and have fewer moments at the water cooler when they go, oh, that bloody form. Why am I filling that in? That makes no sense. Removing those gets us closer to warfighting readiness. And I would encourage not just our RAF colleagues in the room to go at it, but actually for that same spirit to be taken for our allies, because there are stupid rules, I suspect, in all our countries that we could usefully get rid of, that we don't require our parliaments to re-legislate on. We can just decide to do it. So let's decide to do it.
Right, I want to get through some more questions. You talked about all-domain warfare, about how you can't do without the support of all domains to deliver, deploy and interconnect in your speech. And this question, given space is regularly flagged as a likely domain where any conflict with the peer or near peer could start, as it provides the ultimate high ground in conflict, why does the new funding not really start until 2030? Noting that the DIP funding announced is largely previously announced funding. There is real concern that there's just too much talk and not enough funding being put behind all of these promises.
Yeah, so we've re-engineered some of the satellite buys that we have during the early years, partly to reflect the different technologies. Now, I'm a bit of a space nerd, so this is one of my specialist subjects. I'm aware that you probably want to get through more questions rather than me bang on about it for a long time. I think the way that we procure space feels a bit 20th century. I think buying space as an asset, especially in a situation where we know space is now a contested environment, where putting up really bus-size assets in space and hoping that that single satellite will be protected in the form of a conflict, I think provides too much risk. So I want to see us move to a mix of space as an asset and space as a service, with more of our friends in the private sector, with us borrowing bandwidth of more of our allies' capabilities, us sharing our bandwidth with more of our allies' capabilities as well. And I think if we are looking at some of the possibilities, that will take some time to develop. So that's one of the reasons why there's not that massive spend in the first 3 years, is looking at how we can work with some of our partners, especially those in the high north, those in the Euro-Atlantic area and those further afield, to look at different ways of procuring space. Now, I think if we allow our people to have the freedom to look at what is best available, what is the most resilient, and also how we do that within a situation where we should assume that we may lose some of these assets in the event of conflict, either just dazzled out of the sky with using fun tools or physically not there anymore. We need to have different approaches, especially for a nation our size. We don't have the satellite fleet that the US does. So we have to take different approaches, and that different approach, I think, allows us to both do really big satellite buys, which we will continue to do, and we'll continue to buy space as an asset, but also to challenge ourselves on space as a service a bit more, looking at bandwidth and how we can get more dual use out of the satellites that exist today and the ones that we know are going into orbit soon.
Okay, so there's more drilling down into the DIP here. The £360 million allocated to FJTS is clearly not enough to recapitalise the fast jet system. Essentially, the question is, are we now back into a hybrid financing stack and a return to PFI like project finance and service delivery? And you talk about how you want that kind of service aspect to space as well. Is that the approach that you're going to be taking? Yeah, so the entirety of that 360 million will not be buying many Red Arrows if we just bought some planes with that money. But that's designed to build up the project and the capacity to start the competition for it. So just like I spoke about space as a service, defence as a service, I think provides the opportunity for us to crowd in private sector capital into defence, both into core defence and into our supply chain, especially supporting SMEs. So I want more capabilities earlier. And even though my defence budget is going up, I want to be able to bring forward monies to get capabilities sooner that we know we'll have the ability to support because our defence budget is going up, but we shouldn't wait till the money's in the bank to then start the procurement for that. And I think, for me, one of the really exciting things that we'll have probably roughly 3 months' time is we'll be publishing the Defence Finance and Investment Strategy at our Defence Investment Summit that's being held in the City of London. That's deliberately looking at how we crowd in VC, patient, sovereign capital, other capital stacks to get into defence. There are billions of pounds of capital that is ready and willing to be invested in defence.
outside the public sector investment. And we need to find investable opportunities that provide the efficiency and, importantly, over the lifetime of that service, the requirement for them to iterate and to improve things at a faster rate than it would be if the public sector ran it. Now, I'm a good lefty in politics, so I believe that there is a role for the state in doing these things. I also want to get us ready for warfighting readiness faster, and that's why private capital can be so important. And the DFIS is one of those, I think, one of the first big European strategies that goes beyond what we've seen so far in European NATO. There's some really good lessons from some of the work that has been done around the US system, I think, around here that we're learning from. So I think there's a good opportunity, but that will be delivering potentially things like the new jet training system, but not just the jet training system, to expand our capabilities.
So a couple more questions. So outside of this room, when would the UK government start the national narrative about the increasing threat? A conversation that most of our European allies started almost 2 years ago. You are the Minister for Readiness. Mm-hmm. There is this real feeling that the UK public isn't ready for the threat that we face.
So we've already started that conversation. What we haven't done is seared national conversation into every one of those press releases. And if I take an early decision that John and myself took to unveil the spy ship Yantar's activity over our undersea cables, that is a deliberate part of that national conversation piece. So the first step is being clear about what we can talk about the risk, the malign activities of our opponents and our adversaries, both in kind of like more traditional military senses of kind of like airspace incursions, support along our NATO flank allies, but also the daily constant cyber attacks that all defence infrastructure and our civilian infrastructure is under. That has started. I think we're about to get to the so what of that. The threat is clearer than it has been for quite some time. We are deliberately articulating the threat in a clearer way than defence has been. But now we need a whole of government conversation that says, what's the so what? So yes, that needs to increase defence spending. Yes, that needs to increase defence industry investment. But there are roles for the public sector. There's roles for the NHS. There's roles for our education system. There's roles for private businesses. And we'll be moving into the so what phase of that conversation towards the end of this year, where that will be more clearly articulated. But I don't think we're going to be Finland overnight in terms of their level of national conversation and culture around it. But we do need to be moving ourselves to be a bit more Norway in that respect, having those conversations and then giving the population something to do with it. Because there's no point just scaring people if there's not an action to go with it.
We've got 1 million NEETs, young people not in education, employment or training. So there's a lot of potential there, isn't there, that you could retrain and offer training for a kind of civilian capability force.
Yeah, and so in the SDR, we set out CNI protection force. We've launched our gap year scheme to get young people in on a gap year, a 1 year timeframe within the military. That's been a really big success in its first year, and we want to expand the reserves. But increasingly, I think we need, as people interested in defence, to make the case that increased resilience and readiness is not just more people in uniform, although it might be. It is certainly more people in industry, more people able to support the development of new capabilities. And that, I think, is where you'll see a lot of focus.
Okay, thank you. So this is from Dominic from the Sunday Times. You said that you're investing in housing and that too many service members are living in substandard housing. You talk about the changes you made to the paint. But the Sunday Times has reported that hundreds of millions of pounds of the military housing budget has been delayed. So how can you reconcile your action with your previous statement?
So I grew up in a military family. I've lived in married quarters when I was very, very small. I know just how important a decent home is for our service personnel, especially for those that are deployed abroad, wanting to know that their family is living somewhere decent at home. We inherited a situation where our military housing was not good enough. There's no caveats, there's no qualification. It was not good enough for our people. That was unacceptable for me. That's why we announced the Defence Housing Strategy, £9 billion, roughly 3 billion-ish for the remainder of this Parliament and 5 billion-ish for the next Parliament to go after rebuilding 9 in 10 military homes. That's the right thing to do. We've delivered the worst 1,250 already refurbed. And so we have families who previously were living in accommodation with black mold in bedrooms, leaky roofs, broken boilers, unacceptable for a modern fighting force in a country that has the pride in our armed forces that we have. It was a disgraceful inheritance, and it's one that we're getting after. So those homes are being done now. There's 14,000 homes in the next tranche that we want to be getting after. We've deliberately gone after the worst ones first, which means the housing costs for the worst ones are higher, and then we're getting towards getting on to the next phase.
But they have been delayed.
So we've slightly reprofiled a small element of it, but only a tiny element of this. And what we've now done is reaffirmed, because there were folks that were saying the commitment is not there, the £9 billion, the full defence housing strategy. We're continuing to refurb housing, and we are undertaking, in addition to service family accommodation, a review of single living accommodation as well, because some of the blocks our people living in, the needs have changed with some of those blocks. Okay. And so I want the SLA to be reviewed. That work is ongoing at the moment. Hopefully we'll publish in the next few months or so. And then once we've done those, then I want the same review team effectively to look at our accommodation abroad for our personnel that are deployed on overseas bases.
Great, thank you. There's just one more question that we can squeeze in, I think. Very encouraging words about capital investment, but without training, then it's just kit. What does the Minister intend to do to prioritise training? What do you intend to do? So
a key part of the Defence Investment Plan, doesn't get a lot of headlines or write-up, was the greater availability of revenue spending. Different bits of defence needs more capital, different bits need more revenue. Getting more revenue spending in the early years means that we can do more deployments, we can do more training. I think we have to be honest that quite a lot of that more training is going to be done in a synthetic environment, and some of the contracts, Dan Jarvis, the new Defence Secretary, announced the new synthetic and the training environment and training system on Salisbury Plain, I think it was last week. That is a multi-billion pound investment in training. We need more of that. But we also, if we are to be true to our word of saying we want to get to warfighting readiness, we have to be able to train our people more. We have to make sure that training is more realistic, and we have to make sure that training is more interoperable with our allies, and that is the plan we're going after. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Minister. It's been great to have you here at the conference, and thanks for taking all of those questions. There were many more. I'm very sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but I do appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.